Hello, welcome to this lecture of Culture and Literature 1.2, created for the School of Education Department of the Rotterdam University of Applied Sciences. My name is Ahmet Çakyoglu, and today we will look at some elements of the short story.
Okay, let's have a quick look at our lecture goals today. Now, you as the student can list the 5 main aspects of a short story. You can describe how short stories differ from novels. You can explain how short stories can be used in your own educational setting. You know what the term genre means, and you can place various art forms into its correct genre, including the ones we have read up till now. You can also understand the basis of the crime genre and discuss why people find it so incredibly fascinating. And of course, you can talk about how authors use that suspense in their stories to compel their readers. Now, what we're going to talk about today, you can see here in the table of contents. So we're going to look at the required reading to make sure you all know what to do. We're going to look at the 5 elements of a short story. We'll look at Freytag's plot pyramid, which we've been using over the past few weeks. We're going to look at genre and literary genres, obviously. And we're going to have an in-depth look at our obsession with true crime. And then, of course, we'll end the session with some final notes. So let's focus on the 5 elements of a short story. Now, first, we have character. And a character is a person, or sometimes even an animal, who takes part in the action of a short story, or of course, any other literary work. And then we have the setting. The setting of a short story is the time and place in which it happens. And authors often use descriptions of landscape, scenery, buildings, seasons, or weather to provide a strong sense of setting. Every good story also has a plot, and a plot is a series of events and character actions that relate to the central conflict. Which brings us to said conflict. Now, the conflict is a struggle between two people or things in a short story. The main character is usually on one side of the central conflict, and on the other side, the main character may struggle against another important character, or maybe even against the forces of nature, against society, or even against something inside him or herself, like feelings, emotions, or an illness. And we've, of course, already talked about themes, so you should already know that the theme is the central idea or belief in a story, and in this case, in a short story. Now, we've been working with the plot pyramid a lot, but let's look at its origin for a second. And we have to look at this man to understand it. This is Gustav Freytag. And Gustav Freytag was a literary philosopher who thought about what makes a story interesting for the readers. He wanted to know how humans narrate the world around them and how they use this to capture the imagination of the listener or the reader. Originally, he focused on 5-act plays. And of course, you are familiar with this. So let's go over the 5 different parts of the pyramid again. So we have the exposition, which is the original conflict that draws us or the reader in. And then you come to the rising action, which brings us the conflict and the suspense, up until the point that we get to the climax, which is the result of the conflict. And now remember, with the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime, the climax may not always be the one thing we're waiting on to happen. It can also be a totally different climax, but it is the ultimate moment where we have some sort of resolution for the conflict or the result of the conflict. After the climax, we get the falling action, which is the part that comes after the conflict. It doesn't mean that it's not suspenseful, but it is after the conflict. And then we have the denouement, or the resolution, which is what happened with all of the characters. And this is almost like words that you see at the end of a movie where we see what happened after the story was over. Now, remember, not all stories have this. So now that we understand how to analyze stories, and in this case a short story, which we will be doing elaborately in class, we can level up to talk about genre. Now, genre is an artistic category or a style, and it is defined by a number of things, including technique, tone, style, topic, and or length. Now, film, art, music, literature, all of these are defined or categorized by genre. And there are a few things you need to remember. So, young adult literature is a genre in itself, much like poetry. Poetry is a genre, but these also can have subgenres. So poetry, for instance, can have a subgenre as epic poetry or limericks or blackout poems. Now remember all of the things we did in the first class. So all of those are genres or subgenres. If we look at music, we have genres like classical, rap, rhythm and blues, rock, pop, country, bluegrass. Even in film, we can name some genres like Bollywood, horror, cartoons, rom-coms, anime. This also goes for art. So expressionism, realism, modernism, cubism, these are all genres of art. But of course, for us, for these courses, it is important to also know literary genres. And we're going to look at some examples. Now, literary genres are created through different aspects, which are also based on technique, tone, style, topic, and length. Now, remember that most usually fall into various categories. So for technique, you can say we have graphic novels and second-person novels, where you choose your own adventure. As for tone, we have the Southern Gothic. For style, we can list autobiographies. For the topic, we can say it can be a fantasy or a crime or a young adult literature. And for length, we can say epic poetry. And these are just a few examples of the many, many possibilities. So this also goes to show that one work can have many subgenres in it. But of course, in these short stories that we've read or are going to read for this course, true crime plays an important role in at least two of them. So let's have a look at why we are so obsessed with the crime genre. And I've taken the liberty to look at a website called mentalfloss.com, which lists some really cool reasons explained by psychologists. And for our obsession with true crime, these are the most important ones. So first things first, there's nothing weird about being true crime obsessed. Dr. Michael Menton says that we're normal and we're healthy. And he also thinks that our interest in crime serves a number of different healthy psychological purposes. So the true crime genre gives people a glimpse into the minds of people who have committed what forensic psychologist Dr. Paul Mattiuzzi calls a most fundamental taboo and also perhaps a most fundamental human impulse, which is murder. In every case, there is an assessment to be made about the enormity of evil involved, and this fascination with good versus evil, according to Mantel, has existed forever. So evil really fascinates us. Now, even as kids, we're drawn to the tension between good and evil, and true crime embodies our fascination with that dynamic. So remember when you used to play with either your Barbie dolls or your G.I. Joe dolls or whatever you were playing with, even with Pokemon, you always have this imagination of like there is a good and there is an evil, and it just fascinates us how that plays out. And obviously, as we grow older, we realize there is more of a gray area, but it still fascinates us. Now, we want to figure out what drove these people to this extreme act and what makes them tick, because we would never actually commit murder as sane people, at least. And then Lost Girl author Caitlin Rother says we want some insights into the psychology of a killer, partly so we can learn how to protect our families and ourselves. So we're simply fascinated by aberrant behavior and the many paths that twisted perceptions can take. Now, serial killers tantalize people much like traffic accidents, train wrecks, or natural disasters. So Scott Bond, professor of criminology at Drew University, writes, the public's fascination with them can be seen as a specific manifestation of its more general fixation on violence and calamity. In other words, the action of a serial killer may be horrible to behold, but much of the public simply cannot look away due to the spectacle. According to Megan Boersma, in Elon Law Review, studies of true crime have shown that people tend to focus on threats to their own well-being. Others have noted that women in particular seem to love true crime, and psychologists believe it's because they're getting tips about how to increase their chances of survival if they find themselves in a dangerous situation. So it helps them, or us in general, feel prepared. Psychologists say one of the main reasons we're obsessed with true crime is because it gives us an opportunity to feel relieved we're not the victim. On the other hand, watching true crime also provides an opportunity to feel empathy for the perpetrator. So Mantell again says it allows us to feel our compassion, not only compassion for the victim, but sometimes compassion for the perpetrator. Because we all get angry at people all the time. And many people find themselves shouting, "I could kill you," or "I could kill them." Fortunately, no one usually does that. Almost no one does that. But then when you see it on screen or read it in a book, you say, "Oh wow, thank God it wasn't me that was pushed over the edge," or whatever. There's that same sense of relief that whatever kinds of aggression and impulse one has, we didn't act on them. Now, people obviously receive a jolt of adrenaline as a reward for witnessing something that is exhilarating. If you doubt the addictive power of adrenaline, think of the thrill-seeking child who will ride a roller coaster over and over until he or she becomes physically ill. The euphoric effect of true crime on human emotions is similar to that of roller coasters or natural disasters. So it gives us an adrenaline rush. And finally, humans like puzzles, and true crime shows and podcasts get our brain going. By following an investigation on TV, people can play armchair detective and see if they can figure out who done it before law enforcement authorities catch the actual perpetrator. So we really want to solve the mystery as we read bits and snippets of it. Now, some final notes before we end this introduction. You are without a doubt very motivated to read the short stories if you haven't done so already. So study the lectures, as we will expect you to know what has been discussed here, so that you can understand the pyramid, understand genre. Make sure you come to class, as we will go into more depth about the assignments that you need to do to finish this course, and of course, hand in those assignments in time.
We have reached the end of this lesson. Please read the short stories before joining the class.